Chapter 6: Auditors' Roles, Responsibilities and Accountabilities, Set of Skills, and Behavioral Attributes. In this chapter, you are going to learn about the expected behavior and attributes of an auditor, how to develop questioning skills, observation skills, listening skills, presentation skills, and other skills that an auditor needs to develop. It's a very important learning for you to become an exceptional auditor. Let's dive in. Chapter 6: Auditor's Roles, Responsibility, and Set of Skills. In this chapter, you will develop understanding of roles and responsibilities of auditors and attributes, the personal attributes of an auditor and set of skills the auditor must develop. One thing you have to remember, the auditee and auditor relation, the interaction and the relationship that you've built during the audit is key to the success of an audit. Role of an auditor. An auditor must evaluate organization's ability to meet customer requirement, whether the organization can provide products or services meeting the customer's requirement. Assess effectiveness of quality management system. The auditor must be able to assess effectiveness, means whether the results are being produced, the systems are working as they have been designed, and people are performing, and the system and the processes are producing results. Assess organization's compliance to legal and other requirements for quality management system. The organization must comply with legal and other requirements applicable to quality management system. This is one of the requirement of ISO 9001:2015. This means that the organization needs to demonstrate that the organization is in compliance. The auditor need not audit legal compliance at the time of quality management system audit, however, has to ensure that the organization has in place a process to ensure that the legal compliance is achieved. The organization is in compliance with applicable legal and other requirement with regard to the product. For example, an organization producing boiler in India must comply with IBR regulation. The same organization, while producing a boiler or a pressure vessel in US, must comply with ASME requirements. So these are requirements related to the products and affect the quality management system. Assess organization's own QMS requirement of the organization. In other words, the auditor has to ensure the conformity to the legal and other requirements, conformity to the requirement of the standard. Also, organization decides to do certain things in accordance with their quality management system. Those requirements are organization's own requirement, decided by them, adopted by them. Those requirements are also to be in conformity. Those requirements also has to be complied with. So therefore, the organization's own quality management system requirements are also to be assessed for conformity. Role of an auditor includes plan an audit. The auditor must plan an audit, conduct an audit to assess effectiveness and efficiency of a quality management system. Efficiencies with least effort, with least input, getting greater results. How soon you can effectively do the audit is efficiency. So effectiveness is producing results. Efficiency is with what limited input you can get greater output, how efficient the system is working. Report objectively. Report without any subjectivity of interpretation is role of the auditor, and follow up an audit when necessary. Sometimes you may raise a serious observation or a major non-conformity which needs to be followed up. In that case, the auditor has to go back and follow up the non-conformity when the corrective actions have been taken, whether the corrective actions have been effectively implemented and going to prevent a non-conformity from occurring or happening once again. Auditor responsibility includes lead and or perform audit as planned, comply with the requirements, of course, follow plan and procedures, remain within the scope. Every organization, when you go for an audit, there is a defined scope. What are the activities, the processes, and the service are covered within the scope. So auditor must limit their audit within the defined scope of the audit. Collect objective evidence. Doesn't mean that they have to take copies of the objective evidence, but need to take note that there is an evidence of conformity. For example, an internal audit was done. You can take the note that audit date was so and so, the audit was conducted as planned. Take note or reference number which can be related to a particular objective evidence. For example, an audit report, the name of the auditor, date of the audit plan for the year, so on and so forth. Then remain alert, of course. Report observations. Whatever observations you have during the audit has to be reported in the report. Verify corrective actions. Of course, whenever the corrective actions are taken, the auditor has to verify the corrective actions are effectively taken. Maintain confidentiality. All information that you get access to during the audit must be treated with utmost level of confidentiality. Act in an ethical manner. These are some of the requirements. What is the responsibility of the team leader? Team leader is in charge of an audit team, including the technical experts, auditor, trainee auditor, and observer who are acceptable to the auditee client. Lead auditor leads and manages the audit effectively. Lead an opening meeting and the closeout meeting, of course. Resolve any conflict. Clarify if any disagreement with auditee and auditor. Let me give an example to you to explain here. There was a disagreement with my audit team member and the auditee. One of the requirement was not in conformity was the view of my auditor. At the same time, the auditee says, no, this is not a non-conformity. We do not agree that we are deviating from anything. So there is a different perspective. So this has gone into a level that I needed to intervene. And then that I have to go by the merit of the case. I cannot side with my auditor, not side with the auditee as well. Now, if I blatantly side my auditor is right, then the auditee does not take it sportingly. At the same time, I cannot straightway side with the auditee because my auditor might feel that I have not looked at his or her viewpoint. So in such kind of a situation, you have to go to the ground. What is the merit of the case? Why there is a disagreement, and find a way which is acceptable to both. And you should have that level of maturity and dexterity to resolve to the satisfaction of all the parties. Resolve the issues amicably so that you can move on to the audit without taking it to an ego. Nobody wants to budge and there is a disagreement and you cannot move further. Team leaders shall have appropriate education, training and experience for the scope of audit. That's very important. For the scope of audit, the person has to be competent. For example, you are going to audit an automotive car service station. It is required, it is necessary that the auditor is fully aware of the requirement, or the team collectively has the knowledge. Each one need not be expert in all the processes, but collectively putting together, a team should be able to audit the entire organization. Therefore, the experience for the scope of audit is quite important. Identify and select team and prepare an audit plan. It is the role of the team leader to identify the audit team members. For example, you know these are the kind of complexities in the audit, and this is the size of the organization, and there's the number of mandates you are going to spend, and this much of geographical spread you have to cover. For that you need 2 or 3 auditors, and possibly you look at the language, their audit competence, their technical competence, the processes to be audited. All those things are required to be considered before a team leader can identify a team member. There is a chapter we are going to talk about selection of the team members, and you should be able to prepare an audit plan. There's an exercise, you have to develop an audit plan. It is one of the most important tasks of the team leader to prepare or develop an audit plan, and that gets agreed with the customer in advance so that that forms basis for the audit. That's called an audit document. So audit plan preparation is the team leader's role. Remain responsible to supervise all members of the audit team. It is a part of the role of the team leader to supervise all the members whether they are progressing well, they are doing their job well, and everyone is progressing as planned and no one gets stuck anywhere. And in case someone gets stuck, you intervene as a team leader and support them so that you all move in accordance with the plan. Lead and representing the team in discussions with the auditee. So the team leader is the focal point of communication with the auditee organization. Submit audit findings and report in consultation with the audit team. After the audit is done, the team leader sits with the team members, takes their view, what is your observation, what is your observation, and this was my observation, and then finally team leader arrives at the team's finding and then presents it to the auditee client. That's how it is done. And the team leader is required to hold regular meetings with the team to ensure that this audit moves smoothly. That's one of the most important things. So this regular team meeting, that hey, what's happening there, I have progressed well, do you have any issue, if everything fine. This kind of communication has to happen with the audit team member at a continuous basis. Auditors should have appropriate education, training, work and audit experience for the scope of audit, of course. Be able to plan, perform audit efficiently with the scope of the audit. That's the role of the auditor. And of course, document relevant observation. The auditor has to document, means take note of the observation and the findings and submit the finding to the team leader or the lead auditor. Be able to verify implementation of corrective actions and non-conformances. When the corrective actions are taken for any non-conformity, the team leader must be able to verify those implementation, that they have been implemented on the ground and really working. This could be done by verifying records, by interviewing with the relevant people at relevant level and see that yes, the corrective action is now in place and preventing further recurrence of a non-conformity. Remain within the scope and the boundary, of course, as the team leader needs to remain within the scope and the boundary. Auditors' knowledge. What kind of knowledge and skill auditors need to have? ISO 17021 is the standard used for accreditation of the certification bodies. So auditors from the certification body needs to possess certain knowledge. Let's see what are the requirements of ISO 17021 2015. Business management practices. They have to understand the context of the organization, the business principles, policies, and the complexities. Audit principles, procedures, and methods. You need to understand all those audit principles. There are audit principles we talk about: the confidentiality, fairness, objectively reporting the audit observation, confidentiality. So remain factual while reporting the audit observation. These are some of the principles and the procedures and the methods for auditing. The certification body's processes and the procedure. Each certification body has their own procedure and processes how the audits are done. So lead auditor or the auditor must be fully familiar with the systems and the processes of the certification body. Specific management system standard and reference document. When you are going for quality management system audit for a specific type of sector, you need to have complete understanding not only of the standard, also the specific documentation. Clients, products, processes, and the organization. Of course, if you don't understand the products and processes of an organization, you can't effectively do an audit. So you need to have a thorough understanding of those processes. Discipline and sector specific knowledge and the skill. Discipline specific, sector specific. Quality management system is a discipline. Sector is, for example, automotive sector, hospitality, mining, quarrying, education, printing, the fabricated metal products, food sector, and so on. These are sector specific knowledge. An auditor who has got solid experience in auditing can audit many departments, but he or she might find it difficult to audit a hospital, for example, if they don't have any experience in that specific sector. But for a doctor, it could be quite an easy walk. Therefore, you need to have sector specific knowledge as well. Organizational context. Organizational context, if you remember the definition, is issues Those are external to the organization and internal to the organization, and their combination which affects the organization's quality management system, their objectives, and their processes of achieving the objectives. Therefore, there are issues that is external to the organization, and the auditor must have a thorough understanding that these kind of organizations operate under these kind of risks, and an organization like this has similar kind of internal issues that they are regularly confronted with and have to overcome on a continued basis. So once you have got the understanding of the external issues the organization is subjected to, it could be legal issues, it could be competitive, it could be environmental, it could be business ecosystem, it could be anything that influences the organization's quality management system, and internal issues which could be legal, which could be internal competence, machinery, equipment, their age, the technology that they apply, the technological system that work. For example, ERP they are using. Some organizations are heavily manual operation driven. Some organizations are software driven. Everything is included in the software. Everything is included in ERP solution, for example. And some organization does the same job but have got a lot of manual intervention or manual involvement of people. So there's different kind of internal context, the type of social structure, for example, customs, culture, values. These are all important issues that an auditor must have understanding. Applicable legal, contractual, and other requirements. We have talked about this little while ago. Even an auditor must understand the legal requirement for the products and services the organization operates. For example, if you want to audit an automotive car service station, few things will be automatically applied, that local regulation for motor vehicles, for example, or murur. In Arabic word they call it murur, which is kind of traffic department. If a vehicle is having accidental damage, that needs a murur's permission, or Department of Traffic issues a permission for the repair. If this kind of permissions are not taken, a car service station cannot do a service of a vehicle which was involved in an accident. A car service station, when you are doing a servicing, you have to see that after the tuning has been done, whether this tuning meets the local regulation for exhaust emission. For example, hydrocarbon and carbon monoxide has got a level of acceptability in every country for environmental protection. That even though it's a requirement for environmental protection, this is a product related requirement, because you are servicing the car and doing the tuning of the engine, which will have influence on the environment. So these are kind of legal requirement which can be applicable. Other requirements may be, for example, if you are servicing a Ford motor vehicle, that's a 10,000 kilometer, Ford specifies some of the inspection or some of the spare parts has to be placed. So those are other applicable requirement. Contractual requirement could be customer wants their tire to be replaced. A customer might ask you change the air filter, you can change the fuel filter or oil filter or spark plugs or whatever. This becomes contractual requirement. So the applicable legal, contractual, and other requirements all are applicable knowledge for the auditors before you go for an audit. Sometimes you need to prepare and be familiarized with those requirements. Knowledge and skill and leadership to manage audit, that's one of the supremely important requirement. When you are managing an audit, you have to have the ability to lead the audit, manage the audit team, interact with the team, set directions, set goals, and interact with the customer and the auditee, resolve disputes whenever they're arising. So knowledge of and skill of auditor to manage audit is very, very important. Auditors' expected attributes. Attributes means behavioral aspects of an auditor. So what is important is that we'll identify some of the behavior that sets you apart from an ordinary person. And auditor skills, auditor attributes are actually very high level of professional attributes any professional must have. Let's look at some of them. Punctuality. You must be on time and maintain timing and schedules. You cannot be delayed when you go for an audit. You must be dot on time, few minutes ahead of time. Imagine your auditee client is waiting and the senior management is waiting for you. You cannot be delayed and go there and everybody is looking at you. You have wasted their precious time and you are lost before you started even the audit. People will not value a person who is delayed, who is not on time. Be perceptive. Perception is important. Grasp the problem quickly without jumping into conclusion. Oh, I know this. No. Look at the merit of the case. Look at what is the issue here and then grasp the problem right is right perception. Have flexible outlook. Look at things from different point of view. Consider merit of the auditor's response. Do not force your own perception. Flexible outlook. For example, an auditee is performing a task in certain way, which is not what you are used to. You have seen the same thing is done in a different way. So your job is to ensure whether the way they are doing meets the standard requirement or not. So whether the controls are adequate and whether they are achieving the results or not. If they are achieving the results, this is fine. So you have to appreciate the viewpoint of others and their way of doing work, and that's called flexible outlook. Disciplined approach. You must be logical, systematic, remain within the boundaries, defined boundaries. Be persistent. Persistence is very important. Maintain planned course of action in spite of any setbacks. Sometimes things can happen, things can go wrong, things can lead to a disagreements, things can lead to an argument, for example. Sometimes it can happen. So what you have to do is do not get distracted, remain persistent, come back to the point. Well, this is what we were discussing, can you please explain this? Your focus is to see how effectively old records are retained in their system. All right, so you have to really look at how they are doing things. Persistence means remaining in the planned course of action. Diplomatic. Diplomacy is very, very important for an auditor. Diplomacy is basically remaining tactful. Remaining tactful as situation demands. Don't get involved in internal matter or conflicts of the auditee or controversies. Positive attitude includes open-mindedness. Confident, of course, an auditor must be confident. Auditor must be objective. Objective means you know what are you looking for, what kind of objective evidence you are looking for, what is the results you want to look for, and what kind of evidence will satisfy you. This is objective. All right. Friendly, you have to be friendly. You don't have to be rigid with your jaw clamped. Like, you have to be flexible. You have to be a friendly person. Shake hands, smile a lot. You don't have to give them a stress that you are in an audit scenario. You have to be polite. Of course, you have to be polite and respectful to the auditee. Of course, diplomatic, we talked about. Maturity and dexterity. Dexterity means a seasonedness. You are a seasoned person. You behave like a really mature person. That's called maturity and dexterity. Constructive. Constructive means you are not trying to find fault. Your audit should give an impression that your objective is big. You are trying to find how good they are. All right. And in case of any non-conformity also, you give an impression that this non-conformity is not to criticize them. If applied, if corrective actions are taken, will help them to become a better organization. Judicious. Judicious means perfectness. You are making a perfect balance. Judicious means you are not too much rigid or too much lenient. You make a judicious balance of things. And honest, of course. You have to be an honest person, sincere person, and of course your intention should be to find degree of conformity, and those kind of things are very important. Ethical, you have to be ethical, fair, truthful, sincere, honest, discreet. Proactive and organized. Proactive and organized. Proactive means you are not waiting for a reaction. You ask questions with a positive attitude. All right. And organized, your things are all in proper shape. You have got your audit plan, your audit notes. You do not start searching where is what. So you are very well organized. All right. You're logical. You move logically. For example, you ask one question, the response is whatever is coming. Your next question should be logically to check whether the validity of previous response was in perfect sense, and whether there is an objective evidence to support or corroborate or support that response you received from the auditee. So logical means you move with a logical sequence as you should move, all right, based on fact and reasoned logic. Decisive, you should be able to make decisions. Observant, observation is very important. An auditor must look at things the way they are supposed to be looked at. It's not seeing, it is looking at the objective. It's looking at the object. It is looking at an objective evidence. So observant means you are looking with a penetrating eye, with a penetrating vision. You are trying to find what is inside the story. Sometimes we see something, but there are inner meaning inside this, so you have to really be observant. All right. Process focused, you must look at processes, inputs, outputs, activities, control, whether the activities are happening logically, if there's a haphazardness in those things, whether they are moving in a logical sequence, whether all inputs are taken or correct inputs are taken, correct sources of inputs were considered for taking the inputs, whether all activities are happening in their logical sequence, whether the controls are applied for inputs, controls are applied for sources of inputs, controls are applied for activities and their logical sequence, controls are applied even for the output and the receiver of those outputs. That is how you look at the things from a process perspective, and there's one of the requirement for the auditor. People sensitive. People sensitive is very important. What is people sensitive? People sometimes feel the auditors have come, they will find different types of questions. What kind of questions they will ask, we don't know. Whether I will give a response which will be satisfying. There may be some kind of concerns. You are coming with a level of authority, and that has to be very well managed, not to intimidate people, rather give an impression that you are here to find fact in a respectful way. You are not going to ask questions to offend anyone or to insult anyone. You are asking questions to find what way they perform certain tasks, so that things are done in the right way. So depending on the level of persons you are interacting with, you have to be really sensitive to the position. Let me give an example of a case that I have experienced in my own career. One of my colleague was great as a fabrication in charge, but his proficiency in English language was not very strong. The auditor was asking question in such a way, he was so frightened, he was literally shivering. So this is a worst case scenario where the auditor's presence and the types of question that ask and the way they ask question could be intimidating for the auditee. Therefore, you have to be people sensitive. Sometimes when you go, we just talk to them in a very different way. Mr. Gopakumar, why don't you tell me about your experience and tell me about your background? You have got a big team of people, I see. How you manage your team? How do you distribute their work? How do you ensure all of them are using the right drawings and the right instruments they're supposed to use? How do you make sure that the people are really progressing well and achieving their daily assigned tasks? Those kind of questions. What is the length of your experience? How did you build up your career to come up to this position? These kind of things will make sure that the person becomes really friendly, and you create an environment of bilateral dialogue. The two persons are talking to each other. It's not interrogation, it is conversation. That's what is important. So people sensitivity is one of the most important thing that you have to consider. All right. And then comes adaptable. Adaptable is you can adapt in different work situation. People copes up with changes in the circumstances, in the changed situations. Technical expert. Sometimes it is possible that the audit team leader and the team members do not have all knowledge on the process necessary to audit an organization competently. certain processes are not known. Let me give you an example. I was in an audit many years ago in a fish processing company. It's one of the largest fish processing company in Oman. They catch fishes from the trawlers and they buy fishes from the local fishermen, store them, cut them, clean them, package them, store them, and export them or sell in the local market. Sometimes they buy fish from the mid sea somewhere, the trawlers have gone, so there's an offshore purchase. So in the deep sea itself, they take the fish and buy these, put them into refrigerated cargo and export it. I am a mechanical engineer. I also had experience in food safety, but we did not have sufficient experience on fish processing, fish storage. What is the ideal temperature? How long a fish can be stored? At what should be the temperature for long-term storage? What could be the temperature for short-term storage? What if there's a power failure? And what happens when the fish is exported and they are going through a different temperature gradient? What kind of degradation can happen? What kind of microbiological growth can happen in fish? What kind of microbiological growth can happen in two different fishes if the same instruments are used for chopping, cleaning, and so on and so forth? What kind of swab testing is required? What kind of cleanliness is required? These are very specific to fish processing industry. So we had to take one technical expert was a microbiologist. So technical expert is providing and filling the knowledge gap that the audit team may have in the processes and the product realization. Includes a technical expert having appropriate education and the training work experience and additional competence in the field of audit. They don't have to be an auditor, but for the type of industry they have to have competence. Work under the direction of an auditor. They do not work independently. They are providing information to the auditor, assigned auditor or assigned team leader. Should not act as an auditor and must report back to the team leader or the auditor they are working with. Observers. Observers are those who are part of the audit team but do not take part in the audit. The accreditation body sends an auditor to witness the audit of a certification body when the certification body is doing an audit. They are observer from the accreditation body. They don't take part in the audit, but they're observing how the auditors are performing the audit. It could also include an auditor in training. For example, a new auditor has completed the training as an auditor. They are in the developmental process to become an auditor. So they join as an observer. They cannot audit. They cannot produce an audit report. They can take note for their own learning. But those notes will not be considered part of the audit. They can learn in the process by working with seasoned auditors. So auditor in training can be part of the observer team. Can be observer from an accreditation body or customer of a certification client. Customer of a certification client. Many years ago, I'm talking about Oman, PDO used to have a process. I'm talking about 1996, 97, that period of time. Few certification bodies were approved by PDO for third-party certification of any contractors who will be doing business with PDO, for example. I'm just giving the example to make it more real. PDO did not stop in any other certification body to be auditing an organization, but in those cases, you have to inform PDO. So PDO used to send an observer and witness how the certification body is performing the audit on the auditee. By doing that, they ensure there is a strict process of surveillance and quality control process that the certification body is doing a thorough and genuine audit, because they wanted to ensure the audit process is credible. Since some of the certification bodies are not already approved by PDO, they were witnessing some of those audits. So sometimes customer of the certification client can also be part of the observer team, but in all cases, customers' approval is necessary. Sometimes customers do not object, but you have to inform that we are including some observer and that is their role going to be, and they are from our accreditation body. Some of the auditors in training are going to be part of our team as an observer. They also will keep everything confidential. They are bound by the code of ethics and code of confidentiality. Everything they see will also remain equally confidential, the way we will keep everything confidential, whatever we are given access to see. So deployment of an observer needs acceptance by the auditee client as well. What would you expect from an auditee organization's top management when you are going for an audit? Should inform the auditee that there is an audit coming up. That's basic information you would expect, right? Provide facility. Definitely you would expect some logistics and facility for the audit team to effectively perform the audit. Appoint responsible and competent staffs, guides, to accompany the member of the audit team. For sure, you would expect that. Make audit team aware of the HSE security and other requirements, because you are going to a different organization. There may be limitation or excess control regulation in certain areas. For example, again in Oman fisheries, when you have gone, we are taken through a stream of disinfectant, and we have gone through a stream of water. Our attire was changed. We are provided with new kind of apron, gloves, head cover, also covering the mouth. You had high neck gumboots so that you go through the water stream. So you are disinfected in the process. You cannot carry any germ. So these are some of the requirements. And after the opening meeting, they have given there certain regulations and certain processes that we would like you to be familiarized with, our processes and the regulation and access control process in certain areas. So these are some of the things you need to know from the organization. Acknowledge and accept cards for necessary corrective action. When you raise a non-conformity or raise a corrective action request, you expect that the auditee accepts them and takes proper corrective action, because you should be allowed to raise corrective action when situation demands so. And so it is expected that the top management creates an environment that NCs or corrective actions once raised is a welcome. Well, there's a deviation. This is a way to address a problem, and we'll do it even better. So this is how they should accept. Attend the opening and closeout meeting. This is one of your expectation, is they're taking part in the opening meeting and the closeout meeting. Auditee organization and their guide. Now just imagine when you go for an audit, you don't know an organization, their departments, who is responsible for which function. It's a whole new organization to you. So it's important the auditee organization, your customer, your client for the audit, provide some guide to guide the auditors to different departments. They are senior people, they are persons in charges of different department, or sufficiently senior level that they can accompany the auditor, introduces the audit team or the audit team members or the auditors to the auditee and connect them. That's what is the organizational guides. So guides are coming from the organization where you are going for audit. So guide is to guide you to organizational units, take you to different departments and introduce with the auditee and the process owners. Guides not to exercise pressure or influence on the auditee. So the guide should not give any response or exert any sort of pressure or intimidate the auditee for behaving in certain way, providing certain response. Guide not to interfere and get involved in the audit unnecessarily. Guide may also function as a witness for the audit. Sometimes an auditee might hesitate to accept, sign on a non-conformity report because they don't know implication of this. So in such cases, the audit guide can acknowledge, yes, I have seen that, I accept this is a situation. So audit guide can acknowledge such kind of observation. Importance of maintaining confidentiality. Auditors must ensure 100% confidentiality of information accessed and received during the audit. Before the audit starts, communication starts. So let us look at what kind of communication should happen before the audit. Establish contact and gather information about the organization and scope. So you gather information about the organization. Where are they located? How many people are there? What type of activity they are performing? Mix of people within the organization. What kind of languages they speak within the organization? Things like that. How big is the organization? What is their scope for the certification? These are all part of information that you need to really take even before the audit is commenced. Without those informations, you cannot even plan for an audit. Formation of team and agreement with the auditee organization. When you develop an audit plan and include the audit team members, you are going to, communicate this to the customer, to the auditee client, and get an acknowledgement and acceptance of the audit team. What happens? We send an audit plan with the auditor names and a brief background with a note that should you have any objection with any auditors, please let us know within the next 5 working days. If you don't raise any objection, we consider that the audit team members are acceptable to you. And if you have got any reason for any objection, you may please let us know within 5 working days. There may be a reason for objection for the auditee to accept an audit team member due to conflict of interest for whatever the reasons. Any objection has to be respected. Final plan for the auditee has to be provided in advance. During the audit, reconfirm the scope of the audit, schedule, etc. during the audit, and then how the audit results will be communicated during the audit, when you are performing, when you find a non-conformity, when you are going to inform by the end of the day, if it is a major, instantly, those kind of communication, and major observation in non-conformity, etc. will be after the audit. After the audit, you have to say how cars, if any, shall be followed up. Follow-up actions. For example, if it is a major non-conformity, you may have to follow up. You have to visit again and do a follow-up audit. If it is a minor non-conformity, you can ask them, okay, provide the corrective action proposed. You agree to the actions, and then client will close out internally. You might do a review during the next surveillance audit if it is a minor non-conformity. If it is a major, you may have to visit once again. So you explain how the non-conformities, depending on their criticality, would be closed out, would be followed up. Follow-up action, if any. Channel of communication during the certification validity period. How during the validity, 3 years validity period normal is granted. So how things will be communicated, who will be informed of, for example, for surveillance audit, or if there is any reasons to communicate any changes, how things will be done. Auditor skills, listening skills, notes taking, of course language. The auditors must have linguistic skill, interviewing skill, presentation skill, some of the skills that auditors must possess. Now, competence evaluation process, how you evaluate the competence of the auditor by reviewing the records. For example, their audit report, their audit records is something that you have to verify. You can verify feedback, sometimes feedback from the auditee, feedback from the peer group, the co-auditors, etc. You can also interviews, you can talk to the auditors direct and conduct an interview. Observation, observing the audit. Observation is you can observe an audit and see how they are asking question, their body language, their poise, their diplomacy, their observational skill, their communication skill, the way they find and conclude the audit, they summarize the audit observations, and so on and so forth, how they behave, their punctuality, and all those things can be verified by observing the auditor. Sometime you can do examination. In one of the case I do remember, I audit for a certification body for environmental management system audit. They sent me a checklist and a questionnaire and also a question paper of 50 marks to write. I've written, and based on that, the familiarity with their organization system was assessed. At the same time, my generic knowledge as an environmental auditor. Post-audit review is done by interview. Now, establishing auditor evaluation criteria. How you can evaluate the auditor, it could be qualitative, it could be quantitative. Now, in qualitative, you can assess their demonstrated personal behavior. For example, I mentioned during the audit, you can check their behavior, their punctuality, their body language, their proactiveness. All those kind of attributes that we mentioned can be checked. Also, the knowledge and the skill on the subject. All right. And quantitative criteria could be the years of their working experience, educational background, number of audits conducted, hours of audit totally conducted, because for the auditor different grade we see that the number of audit mandates they have audited. So the audit mandates gives a quantitative criteria for their competence. Auditor must have general knowledge, discipline and application of discipline, sector specific techniques, processes and the practices, regulation, legislation to examine management system and generate appropriate audit findings and conclusion. That's one of the most important requirement. So discipline and application, discipline specific method. Examples: context of the organization, you need to know processes, different processes for an organization and the type of industry, risks and opportunities, determine the controls and the risks involved, and the communication. Knowledge and skill related to sector specific knowledge. Knowledge and skill should be sufficient to enable the auditor to examine the management system within the context. Then external and internal issues, those can bring in opportunity and risk both of the sector and generate appropriate audit findings. Examples could be process equipments, raw materials, hazardous substance, process cycles, maintenance, logistics, workflow organization, how things are working, what kind of process flow is involved. ISO requires processes and their integration. So workflow organization, how different things are done out here, working practices, staff scheduling, organizational culture and behavior, leadership specific to a sector. These are some of the issues. Let us talk about the skill of the auditor. Observation skill. Observation made during the audit is critically important. There's a picture here. What you could find and what you missed. All right? What you have seen and what you might have missed. You write it down. We move to the next slide and then we will see what is your observation. Questioning and communication skill. Questioning skill is extremely important. We as an auditor are actually asking questions. Can you please explain me this? Can you elaborate? Why don't you say something about this? So we are involved in a conversation with the auditee. The method of conversation is asking question and listening to their answers and asking another question, and that's how the conversation progresses. So the types of question that you ask is very, very vital for an effective communication, an effective conversation. So let's look at the type of questions is important for you to understand. Direct question. You ask a direct question which gives a definitive answer. Can you please tell me what you do when you get a request for providing a product or service? A direct question. All right. Open question is that opens up a discussion. Can you please explain the process of your contract review? Or can you please explain how you decide a supplier? Or can you explain how you perform a design validation? Or can you explain your design verification process? So what happens is you are asking the auditee to elaborate and explain. When starting a conversation, you ask an open question. From there you take lead and then you can ask direct question, open question further, and close question. Sometimes the auditee does not want to speak much. So you have to ask and start the conversation so that they're encouraged to speak. So open question is the first type of question that you should start an audit with. Close question is where the answer leads to an yes, no type of monosyllable answer. Sometimes the auditee is speaking too much. That's not what is interesting for you anymore. So you ask a close question. And that's how you balance. Clarifying question is when the answer is provided, you are clarifying your understanding to reinforce your understanding. So what you said is once you receive a request, you log it in a register and then you review it and then you keep a record and the record is retained for 5 years. That's what you said. Is this right? So you are clarifying a question. So clarifying is very important because that is how you are concluding. Leading question. Leading question is you are suggesting an answer and having a confirmation from the auditee. So what you said, once you get a request, you review, you keep a record and then like that. All right. Hypothetical question. What if the customer provided instrument that you use for your measurement is out of calibration? This kind of hypothetical situation. So hypothetical question is to assess unusual but unexpected situation. What happens if? Silent question are basically
So, so you are actually looking at the auditee silently. You're not asking any question, but looking at them. When you are looking at an auditee, like looks like you are staring at them, can create some kind of discomfort. So you should never ask this kind of question, never show this kind of gestures. So you should always start with a direct question, open question that opens up a discussion, that opens up a dialogue. And then based on the progress, you can ask some closed question where the answer will be yes or no, because you want to control the conversation. And then sometimes you ask a clarifying question based on the response that you receive, just to summarize your understanding on the subject. You can ask a hypothetical question, assuming a probable scenario. You never ask interrogative question and never ever silent questions.
So, show inquisitiveness. You are interested to learn, not interrogate. 5W and 1H are the friend of auditors. So, you will ask what, why, where, when, who, and how. Use these words. These are golden words for the auditors for you to frame question. What do you think about it? Why do you feel so? Where is this record kept? When do you do the review? When there is a change, what do you do? Things like that. Who does the review? How do you ensure that the records are safe? Those kind of questions. So use inquisitiveness and never an interrogative mode. Never ask questions as if you are interrogating an auditee. Good communication is very important. Develop questioning skill and ask one question at a time. An example I've already given. Can you please explain how training needs are identified in your organization? Who is responsible to maintain these records and indoctrination record? How long they are retained? Auditor skills we have talked about. Develop human and social skills, communication and presentation skill. Create a friendly environment. Remember, we create an impression in the first 5 seconds we met someone. So go well prepared. Your first few minutes in the beginning is crucially important when you are in opening audit meeting and meeting the auditee for the first time. Give an impression that you mean business, you are punctual, you are well trained, you are diligent, you are intelligent, you are smart, and you are confident. All those things are very, very important. So set a friendly tone at the time with the auditee. Establish eye contact. We have already mentioned about it. Give time to relax. Body language. A confident body language is very important. If you are looking very stressed, you are sitting on the edge of a chair, you are restless. This shows that you are not at ease. Sit very comfortably. Relax. Keep yourself in a very composed position. Look at the eyes of the customer. Shake hand confidently and give a very composed body language. So that's very, very important. Paralanguage, non-verbal nuances, don't misuse them. You have to be very careful on the non-verbal nuances in communication. Cultural sensitivities. Cultural sensitivity is very important. We audit in different geographies. Every culture, every place has got a distinct culture and behavioral expectation. You have to be very, very respectful to the local behavior and culture. Let me give you an example. At this point of time, I am recording this video from Kuwait. It's a very moderate country, yet is quite mindful about the social tradition and social expectations. Here it is not very common to shake hand with the women if they are not volunteering. But again, if you are in US, possibly you will not behave like that. You will shake hand with everyone, and that's a social expectation. That's a normal expectation in that society. So be mindful of those expectations and the common practices and the behavior customs prevailing in those areas. Human factors. Human factors are, we have already mentioned, be respectful and understand the level of personnel being audited. So when you are interacting with the persons, you have to see their basic background, their level they are working in. Accordingly, you have to come to their level. Human factors are very vital. When you are talking to a chairman, you have to act with the level of maturity a chairman expects, and that's your behavioral dynamics. When you are talking to a welder in the shop floor, and they are not expected to have that level of educational background, but they're very important for their task. So you have to come to the level of the person you are interacting with. This is called human factors. Interpersonal distance, very very important. If you are coming very close, that the person feels discomforted. Remain at a safe and comfortable distance is very very important. So shake hand and sit back and relax. So that's the kind of distance, very very comfortable interpersonal distance. Now, a few interesting fact and perception about the eye contact. In some society, eye contact between male and female is not welcome. I mentioned about it. Yeah, it is said that 2 to 5 seconds of eye contact is good. All right, shows interest in the subject. 10 to 12 seconds is intimidating. You are looking at somebody, you are not removing your eyes. More than 15 seconds, you are not moving your eyes only, it shows some level of intimacy. So just keep your eye contact with the 2 to 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds at the most. So look at somebody, can you please tell me this? And then you take note, yes sir, or can I take a note of this? So you are actually keeping eye contact within that time. So these kind of things are very very vital. Now, as a learner, you are going to develop some questions. I'm going to send you an assignment. In that, you are going to write different types of questions that you are going to ask. I will give you a particular clause of ISO standard, and that you are going to ask 5 different types of questions to audit this particular element. It should be open question, closed question, leading question, hypothetical question, and interrogative questions. Again, don't ask interrogative question, but just for the practice, I'm going to give you this exercise. Listening skill. You have to be great as a listener. A great auditor is a great listener also. Trust me, if you are not listening, you are missing a great portion of information that is coming, flowing towards you. So the 80-20 rule says, listen 80% of the time, 20% of the time you talk, you ask questions. Okay, so art of listening is develop active listening skill. How you are actively listening? Is it? Yes, I think you are right. So give some kind of positive response. Yes, I think you are right. Yes, okay, I see, I understand. Things like that. Some amount of interaction will have to be there to show that you are really listening. Listen carefully. Absolutely. Look at the eyes and make sure that you are really listening to what they are saying. It is not hearing. We hear sounds, but we listen to music. So, or listen to a conversation. So, listening is important. Hearing means you are hearing some sound. Listening to the word and the speech they are giving, or the response they are giving. Therefore, listen carefully. Avoid distraction. Don't look at this side and that side. You remain riveted onto the subject so that you get the meaning, you get the response that you have asked question. You asked a question, response is coming. Remain careful, listen carefully so that you will understand what is responded back to you, whether this is the response you wanted, so that you can make a conclusion on your question that you have asked. That's how you are making judgment and making a decision on your conformity. All right, clarify doubts if you have got and summarize before your judgment. We are going to share some of the video clips as a part of your assignment. You will listen to that and send back the response. We'll see how good you are in listening and how well you have listened to the audio clip. So auditors therefore need to observational skill, conversational and effective communication skill, questioning skill, listening skill, understanding of the psychological aspect of human relation, ability to instill confidence and trust. And that's all about it. I try to give as best information as possible. We'll have a summary during the tutor guided session during the class when you attend the program. But however, if you have got any question, you can always ask me and you can expect to get my response. Thank you so much. This is end of chapter 6.
I hope the chapter was interesting. The information shared was really useful. I advise that you can go back and forth and reinforce your understanding on certain aspects of the auditor's skill, behavioral attributes, the abilities that the auditor must develop. Trust me, that is not for the auditors alone. For any professional level you are working, these are ideal attributes of a top-notch professional. I wish sincerely you develop those skill sets and abilities and attributes. I wish you all the best and become a great auditor.